think one of the only options we have left may be to turn the system against itself and to use the internet and social media and creative social media to get the truth out to more people quicker. Today's video is mainly focused on the concept of mutant swarms and how the viral genome changes during the course of its progression through a population like it did in Wuhan, and where we are with the state of the genomes of the various strains that are moving around the world, and what that means for infection, and what that might mean for, going forward, what will happen. I think if you want to summarize the ride as quickly as possible, I would say that the main issue is that now we have several strains of this Wuhan virus going around, and these several strains probably have different levels of virility and different levels of infection capability. Some of them may be very restricted to the lungs, and others of them may be able to pass to other tissues. There are already reports of infection in the central nervous system, for example. So if these different strains have different attributes in terms of how they manifest in infection, then we could have a very serious problem on our hands, in the sense that we could have multiple bugs to fight, and at any given time, depending on how long the virus manifests itself inside of one host, a host could be exposed to several different strains of this virus over the course of a month, if the population were to get more and more infected around the world. And that could result in a situation where people will be fighting too many strains of a particular virus at the same time. That is separate from the idea that the virus itself, when it's replicating inside of a single host, it's creating its own sort of mutant swarm, a swarm of viruses with small variations from the original virus that infected that host. Even separate from that is the idea that as it moves from host to host, these small changes accumulate, so that isolated populations of viral infections tend to diverge genetically. And that's what we see on the planet right now. Again, there are 150 so different strains of the virus that we've currently sequenced, and those are still in the process of changing. And that, again, I'm detailing or talking about on the bike, in terms of how we know a lot about that with the flu, and we have a lot of data about how the flu changes every year, and so I think you can expect that this coronavirus will be very similar. What that means is that we have a potential for it to mutate in America to a more innocuous virus, but on the other hand, a mutation could also bring a gain of function and make it more deadly. So there was another question online, and on the thing that I tried to address in the ride about tuberculosis, and whether tuberculosis could be the actual cause of this disease. In China, I think that's possible, especially in Wuhan, where they had such a problem because of the history of tuberculosis. There's just a lot of, let's say, circumstantial evidence to suggest that something like that, where tuberculosis plus a virus, could be the reason why it was so deadly in the Wuhan province. But you can see from these maps here also, though, that the Wuhan virus is different than the virus that's in America. And so the question of whether or not the lethality will be able to be explained by that genetic difference, that I don't know. But the potential is there for that difference to be there, and then for there to be a difference in the way that it manifests. And that's, again, separate from this, what I think is probably a lot of speculation about the fact that the virus may just affect Asian people differently. The only thing that I find very creepy about that, of course, is the many times in fiction in the last 20 years that a race-specific virus has been talked about before, joked about before, or even, threatened before in books and TV and in fiction. And then also the idea that they're going to take advantage of it, and of course they are, and I talk about that on the bike ride as well. So thanks for joining me. I hope you enjoy the ride. It's a morning ride, so the energy's a little different.
Coronavirus delivery prime. Good morning, Pittsburgh and universe. This is JC on a bike. My name is JC, and this is a special morning report. I'm going to address a couple succinct issues in the coronavirus story 2020 to try and either inform people about a phenomenon that they may not yet be aware of, or to clarify a phenomenon that people may have heard of but don't understand. And again, remember, I'm a biologist, but I'm not a virologist, so the only thing I can do is try to read about this stuff and see if I can figure it out for myself. And you should be taking advice from me just as much as you should be taking advice from your very respected and very smart uncle, or your very well-read aunt, or even your extremely knowledgeable daughter. And each and every one of us has the responsibility of participating in this society. You can't just let the television tell you what to think, and the television what to buy, and let the television tell you what to do. You got to make decisions for yourself, and that means collecting information from sources that are available. I assure you, from all my many years of reading about how our society might actually function, I can assure you that one thing is for sure: the truth cannot be hidden from everyone. And the best I can tell, the people who are really in charge, there's a certain weird nobility about them, and the truth is always out there. Our prison without walls, you can find those walls if you look for them. And I'm one of those people who feels like I've been looking for those walls and feeling them out for my whole life. Because make no mistake and have no doubts, I believe that the American system is part of a larger global network of people that work together to make sure that them and theirs benefit greatly from the way that the world is organized. World history and human history, if you read enough, there is a consistent thread whereby money and lended money and fiat currencies are used to control entire governments and entire cultures. That's how it works. The people who reap the benefit of being able to pull money out of thin air and charge you and my family and your family interest on that imaginary money is the way this whole system works. His family had enough wealth so that it was better for the banks to help him hold on to his money and make more money with that money than it would be to just outright take it. But for you and I, who don't have a lot, who work 40 hours a week plus for scrape-by wages or horribly underpaid salaries, just move over, you shit driver. God dang it. The only way the banks can get us is nickel dime us. Don't you see? If you have a pile of money, then it's better for the bank to take advantage of that money and use it to make more. But if you don't have a pile of money, the only way the banks can make money off of you is if they nickel and dime you. So here again, socialism for the rich and hardcore capitalism for the poor. And now factor in something like coronavirus. And a couple people asked the question, what do you think about the idea of this being just a big hoax that they're using to usher in new controls? That is not a hoax. It is a well-known fact that taking advantage of crises to advance the controller's agenda is the primary way that this system works. So the debate about whether or not this is a bioterrorist attack from one side against the other or whatever, or whether it's an accident, or whether it's a man-made virus or a naturally occurring zoonosis from bat soup, is quite frankly irrelevant at this stage. Because now what we need as people to do is make sure that the apparatus, the Democratic, Republican, military-industrial complex theater apparatus that is our government control mechanism, this machination is going to try and take maximum advantage of this situation. And so that would be my interpretation of why, for example, we're not responding with more draconian measures. We're going to wait. We need the situation to get much more serious before there's something to take advantage of. If you do it now, really early, and then you end up saving everybody, you'll actually never get to implement anything new. And one of the things that I think is frightening is to think about what China is talking about now and relay that in terms of what we've predicted 10 or 15, even 20 years ago about what was the next goal for the powers that be. Excuse me. And that is, flash it up on the screen, cashless economy. You want to talk about the people who are suffering over in China. You don't think that part of this is China also exercising maximum advantage in this situation? You're crazy. I'm not saying anything about whether the Chinese government is responsible for this in a negligent or accidental or nefarious way. It doesn't matter. It's out there now. But did they take advantage of it? Did they, for example, do all these draconian things to flex their muscles to make sure that the next time they could do it, they knew how to do it? That it would go better? Sure they did. And they're talking about it constantly in their own media. Don't use cash. Cash has to be cleaned. I'd bet dollars to donuts that within a month we're going to hear that China's going to go cashless. And if China goes cashless, I'm getting scared. I'm getting scared because then I think that is really a predicted outcome. If you want to go down the list of things that we talked about and have talked about since I was first thinking about this stuff, it's cashless economy. Because then what they can do, if you become a fugitive, if you speak out against the government, they can just turn off your wallet and now you can't do anything. In order to get this social system that they have, that they want to put in place in China, where you get social ranking and social points, this would be the ultimate penalty, right? If you just, at the bottom, you don't get to participate anymore. You're homeless with no money. You're gonna have to come in. So I think this is the most frightening part of this virus, apart from the fact that it is biologically terrifying, and we'll talk about that in a minute. This part about control, I think, is definitely an issue that you can't ignore. And it's not really so much of is it, but to what extent can they use it to their advantage? And then that's where you have to look at the response and question whether or not they're really wholeheartedly in it, or whether they're trying to maximize profit or maximize opportunity that has not yet shown itself. Because right now in America, it's not that big a deal yet, right? It feels like it might be, but I'm not seeing any numbers yet, and so they're either doing a very good job of keeping it quiet, or the viruses that are over here right now genomically are far enough away from the Wuhan one that they're not nearly as deadly. And that's what I'm going to talk about as I keep riding. So, Mutant Swarm. It's a concept that sounds really terrifying, but it's actually a fundamental part about how viruses work. And it doesn't just have to be coronaviruses. All RNA viruses, there are lots of different kinds, but all RNA viruses essentially have the same issue. Because they use RNA as their genomic encoding molecule and not DNA, there are a few things that are not present. The machinery doesn't exist. And I guess the long story short is this: inside of your cells, there are enzymes and such that the virus uses to replicate itself and to make parts of itself, right? It doesn't have ribosomes inside of it. Ribosomes are huge. So it doesn't have ribosomes in it. And as I understand it. And so because it's hijacking these molecules from your own cells and only bringing the bare bones with it, the one thing it does bring along is the RNase that copies itself, copies its DNA. But it brings along the RNA version of that protein. It still needs to be translated into the functional RNase by your own cells. Whew! Sorry, this is a hill, if you can't see that. And even though I have an electric bike, I still have to frickin' pedal. So the RNase gets made by your cells, and then it makes more viruses, more viral DNA, more viral RNA, excuse me. And that's just one part of the process of building the virus inside of you, of an individual cell. And you might think from your high school biology, okay, the virus is making copies of itself in my cells and then infecting more cells and keep going until it activates inflammation, allows a secondary infection, this kind of thing. But you might not think about the fact of how fidelitous or non-fidelitous the copying of the virus is. Because in your high school biology, you talk about DNA as genomic and how amazing it is that you can copy DNA without making errors. And how awesome it is that the code is double-sided, yada, yada, yada. All true. 100% true. But for RNA viruses, the translation process is error prone. And it's been estimated by some scientists that the error rate could be even higher than one base pair error per replication. So if you're making millions upon millions of copies of a virus during an infection in a single host, then you're getting a lot of genetic variation from the original infection of the virus in any given host. That is sort of the idea behind what goes on in the bat populations of China. They have become a mutant soup of coronaviruses. And because of the way that coronaviruses are assembled within the cells of their host, this sort of recombination and error and error proneness of the replication of the virus in those cells leads to the natural creation of extreme variation in the virus. What that means is that you could have some viruses of type A, and they'll get into a bat, or let's say a human now. We have viruses, coronavirus in a human, in me, and I have strain A. But by the time I become contagious, and the virus is replicated enough in my body after the incubation period of between 14 and 30 days, whatever they don't know for sure, then those viruses have made enough errors in their duplication of their genome, many, many errors each time they copy it, that you can end up with significant changes in the sequence of the virus that next infects, say, my boss at work 2 weeks from now after I sneeze in his office. Because the virus will have replicated inside of my body a few thousand times, if not more, and each one of those times is quite prone to error. Now she said no. And so this natural diversity is, for example, what led to the really bad flu outbreak in America for the Spanish flu. It's my understanding that the Spanish flu started out pretty bad, and then after some local population of, explosions in population infection rate, then it mutated a bit and became even worse. And that's what led to the huge, disaster that the Spanish flu was. That's my understanding. Could be quoting it wrong. Holy cow, that scared the hell out of me. Woo, that guy barked right in my head. And I love dogs, but that frightened me. Okay, where was I? So yes, this genetic diversity means that in a really awful scenario, especially in a crowded place where there's lots of hosts, you could get a scenario where the virus mutates as it moves through Pittsburgh, and by the time I come back through Lawrenceville in a month, the virus will have gone through so many hosts that will have mutated enough so that I can get sick again. And now I have 2 viruses in my body. I was still fighting the first one, and now I've got 2. And this process can multiply. And that's the scary part of a pandemic, because right now what you see around the world, they found approximately 150 different strains from the original Wuhan virus. And so you just have to imagine a scenario where all of these strains eventually start their own little, spreading events. And so do we really need to absorb all of these strain variants now? That doesn't seem likely, but without strict controls on how fast this stuff spreads around, you can imagine a scenario where unlimited air travel and no control on movement could lead to a real severe problem if you look at the strain distributions on this map here. If the people in Wuhan are suffering because the worst strain is the purple one, and as long as that strain stays contained there, it will eventually mutate out. That's a reasonable gamble, I think. But the fact is that it doesn't really seem to be going away yet. And the mutation rate is pretty fast, judging from what we can see here. I don't know how it compares to the flu. And that's something I wanted to try and find out before the morning, but I couldn't figure it out. But there is a paper here that I wanted to include about this whole idea to give you an example of how much we know about the flu. I've shown you a couple different examples of the current reports of the genetics of the coronavirus 2019 from Wuhan and how it's spread around the world. But this paper shows you for many, many years the sort of genetic tree analysis that occurs when designing the flu vaccine. And so you can see that we do a lot of meticulous research sequencing the flu strains that move through the United States every year and move through Europe every year. And with this kind of vigilance, we can learn a lot. Oh, that's nice. Thank you. We can learn a lot about how these viruses evolve. And we do know a lot about it. One of the interesting things is that some of the antiviral drugs, their primary mode of action, it seems, is to increase the error rate or decrease the error rate of the viral replication. And it seems from a lot of different research perspectives that over, probably millions of years of evolution, RNA viruses have evolved to have a very specific rate of mutation, which is ideal for their constant presence in the population. Not wiping out entire host populations. That doesn't work for a virus. Then it's also gone. That's why Ebola doesn't make it very far. Ebola is essentially too deadly, unless you sprayed a city with it. Oh yeah, we did that once. America did. Funny, huh? We're such a great place. We have such an unblemished track record of human rights advocation and world global justice. I read about the tuberculosis thing. I don't think this is crazy. Tuberculosis has been very high in China in particular. I'm going to try and find some of these sources from my earlier reading. And so the argument from this blog may very well be true, especially in the Wuhan province where this worst strain has killed so many people. It could have, I guess it's possible, but I'm not really sure how such a big error could be made. I'm still trying to figure it out by reading more. because it's not clear to me. I've tried to find doctors who can explain it to me, and so far I haven't gotten any answers. I don't know. It's annoying. I don't want to ask my own doctor, though. He'll probably think I'm crazy. But you know, this morning I had a fight with my wife. And what was it about? It's just about how awful I've felt in the last 10 years. And really acutely in the last 3 since I've moved back to the United States. For those of you who are still listening, I'll just give you a brief biography. But I wanted to go to med school when I was in university. I was sure I was going to be a doctor. And then I just kept getting waitlisted year after year. And while I was waitlisted, I was teaching high school in Chicago public schools and bartending and in Chicago. And then at some moment, bartending became so lucrative. You know, after you work there a while, they give you a Friday night or something. Seriously, he didn't move out of the way. What's he honking about? Oh, phone zombie. You just gotta watch out for the phone zombies. And then I lost that bartending job after a couple years because I let my bar back cover a shift for me, and the owner fired me. So I had to look for a job, and a guy by the name of Khalid Hawamed taught me to patch clamp at the University of Chicago as a technician. And there I met a guy from Holland who was about to finish his postdoc there. And to cut really short through the corner, at some moment he invited me to be his first PhD student in Holland. And that was right after 9/11. And I said, oh my God, get me out of here. Good morning, gentlemen. It's Friday at least. Is there something happening?
Like they predicted it was
Yeah,
supposed to
right.
be snowing.
Right. Don't get mad. Don't get mad.
The eye on that tries to shut when you're trying to get stuff off.
I'm gonna get it.
There.
Yeah, baby. Thank you, sir. So I let my bar back cover for me. I got back, I had a phone message saying, hi, this is Mike Schuba. You're fired, give me your keys. Whatever he sent. Hung up. So I had to find a job, and anyway, I got a job out of the want ads of the Chicago Tribune that said, had a research technician with microscope experience and good hands or something like that. And so I applied and I got this job. I ended up learning to patch clamp, which is still the methodology and research technique that I use today. And that was in 2001 or 2000. Yeah, the year 2000. 1999 maybe even. And then after 2 years with him, I moved to Holland to do my PhD with Hybe. And he was a guy I met at the University of Chicago. And when he offered me that opportunity, I think I moved 1 month after I was offered the job. It didn't take me time at all to decide to go at that time. The politics in America had become so polarized that it was disgusting. And George W. Bush had been put into office, but everybody on the left was angry about that, but not angry about the fact that the only person that we could have voted for was Al Gore, who was Republican light. I mean, and that's what they keep doing to us, right? You can't really be mad at the people on the left for wanting change, but you got to be mad at them for buying into the bullshit of the Democratic National Committee, because they are nothing but Republican light. And they differ on only 2 or 3 things with the rest of the Republicans, and the Republicans only differ on 2 or 3 things with the Democrats. The Democrats will try to take away your guns and give you the right to abortion, and the Republicans want to take away abortion and keep guns, and that's about the difference. Everything else is exactly the same. Billions of dollars on weapons, no problem, nobody disagrees. Billions of dollars in subsidies for pharmaceutical companies, no problem, nobody disagrees. Billions of dollars in subsidies for the oil and gas industry, no problem, everybody agrees. But billions of dollars for taking care of children, or billions of dollars for educating children, billions of dollars to pay qualified teachers to teach their way rather than the state's way. We don't have any money for that stuff. That's the part of this system that bothers me now. And so yeah, they're going to take advantage of this either way. I hope this was helpful. I hope this was a good introduction. I hope I got it right. But again, it's improv. It's on the bike. I hope you realize that's what makes it more authentic. And if you welcome me, I guess I'll do a weekly spot. Be well. Take care of each other.